The disciples came to him, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming?"
Hello and welcome to this ministry revealing world events and their impacts as signs of the last days prophecies from the Holy Scriptures. In this session, we look at the prophetic signs of the European Union as the revived Roman Empire of the Daniel Prophecies, who soon steps into its prophetic role to fulfill the last days prophecies around Israel and Jerusalem. You may ask, why is this important? Because the prophecies foretell to us that it's from a last days revived Roman Empire that the role is fulfilled that brings peace and an agreement in the Mideast with Israel that triggers a countdown of prophecy fulfillment. You see, in the prophetic eyes of God, the Roman Empire never ceased to exist, and it fell from world dominion but was not destroyed. Its remains continued in Europe and continued to influence the world. And now in the last days, the neo-medieval Roman Empire has revived and extended as prophesied as a European Union. This is as foretold in the prophecies of Daniel, where God gave us his big picture worldview of the empires of mankind that would dominate the world until the coming of Jesus the Messiah, bringing peace on earth. In Daniel chapter 2, the prophecy was of a great image of a man with a head of gold, chest of silver, thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and then feet and toes of iron mingled with clay, representing the world empires, with the Roman Empire being the rule of iron and the influence of iron continuing to the end of the age in the feet and 10 toes. This prophecy foretells how the Romans of Europe are the last complete world empire with its army of legions in iron dominating the world, but also foretells how this empire will revive and extend into the last days for final prophecy fulfillment, with an iron-like union of leadership represented in a 10 toes confederation or union that point the way toward influencing the world in the last days human world government. This is further confirmed in Daniel chapter 9, where the archangel Gabriel appears to Daniel informing him of the future, how that Messiah the Prince would be cut off, and also the Jewish city and temple sanctuary destroyed by a people from whom will also come a last days dark prince. We know from Scripture and history that Jesus Christ was killed by the Romans, and the Jewish city of Jerusalem and its temple also destroyed afterwards by the army of the Roman Empire. These prophecies foretell to us that a confederacy or union of leadership as a European Union arises out of a revival of the remains of the Roman Empire, who steps into the prophetic role leading into fulfillment of the last days prophecies around Israel and Jerusalem. And it's the European Union of Europe who has risen up from the remains of the Roman Empire. Just as Israel was miraculously raised back up by God as a nation in 1948 as a sign of the last days, at the same time in 1948, the Roman Empire also revived with the original beginnings of the European Union. In 1948, the Congress of Europe was convened in The Hague under Winston Churchill's chairmanship by the European unification movements led by statesmen of whom many would later become known as the founding fathers of the European Union. This was the first move toward a revived European unity that grew up into the European Union. And the European Union, also known as the EU, is the only modern neo-empire that truly influences the entire world today, whose existence sprang up from the continuing remains of the original sinners of the Roman Empire and its Roman Church. And it is a bona fide empire. An empire is an extensive group of countries under a single authority, and the EU is currently a union of 28 countries covering the continent, with a single currency and a centralized political government headquartered in Brussels, where the European Parliament holds its meetings. But the EU is even bigger and stronger than that. In addition to the member nation states, the EU has another 16 countries in Eurasia, also as associated members in the Union, including Israel. Additionally, most all nations of the world, through bilateral agreements, participate financially in some way with the EU. The European Union is the dominant force that moves the United Nations. In 2011, the European Union was provided enhanced participation rights at the UN, which allowed the EU, its member states, and associated countries to operate as a single bloc of 46 countries. This means the European Union controls the votes of 1/4 of the entire UN membership. As the current High Representative of the European Union recently said, the European way is the United Nations way, and the European vision is the United Nations vision. In other words, as goes the EU, so goes the UN. This union of the Europe nations is truly a modern empire influencing the world. Its ability to employ soft power diplomatically to persuade other countries to change their behavior is powerfully unique. Although Europe already possesses impressive military assets, yet the main drivers of its global influence is otherwise. The Europeans have rather chosen to specialize in non-military statecraft, with its economic and diplomatic clout used, and here their overall capacities far exceed those of the United States. One European specialty is that it knows how to negotiate alliances. No other national entity has been as successful at negotiating as has Europe. Its European Union of nations came into being through negotiations, and its sphere of influence has permeated the world through the power of diplomatic negotiation. No other superpower is as powerful as Europe at negotiation and diplomacy. And it is through these characteristics and capabilities of the EU that directly connect the EU to the Revelation 6:2 prophecy of the first horseman of the apocalypse, where it says, "Behold, a white horse. He who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer." The rider had a crown like an emperor of an empire that went out conquering, but was doing so through influence and coercion instead of war, for the rider had a bow but no arrows. And this is the approach of the EU as the revived Roman Empire, that through a spirit of diplomacy and economic coercion can influence Israel and the world toward an agreement in the Middle East as the prophesied rider of the white horse of Revelation. And just as Europe rose up after the British Balfour Declaration 100 years ago with the rise of Hitler, watch for Europe to rise up again after the Trump Jerusalem Declaration, with them moving forward into the lead for Middle East peace negotiations. As the Daniel prophecy foretold, this people who cut off the Messiah, Jesus Christ, and destroyed the city and the sanctuary of Jerusalem afterwards, shall also have a prince or leader who is to come, who will confirm a covenant with many in the last days, meaning that the European Union as the revived Roman Empire will rise to the forefront during Mideast negotiations, finding success in those negotiations with Israel, and making an agreement with Israel over Jerusalem and their temple. And this revived Roman Empire of the European Union will emerge as the accepted leadership in a last days one world government. Already the signs of the prophecies are coming true, with the Muslim Arab world revolting against the U.S., saying Trump's Jerusalem decision brings an end to any U.S. role as a peace broker in the Middle East, and they will no longer accept any peace plan proposed by the United States. Instead, they have already called upon Europe to play a stronger role in peace efforts between themselves and Israel. And the European Union just announced planning to speed up a two-state solution peace deal for Israel. These are signs a prophetic pathway is opening up, like we have never seen before in the history of mankind, for the last day fulfillment of the Daniel and Revelation prophecies. The signs of the last days show the world is on the precipice of major end-of-the-age prophecy fulfillment, warning all to prepare and ensure they're in the born-again church of Jesus Christ, whose moment of rapture is near when born-again believers rise to meet Jesus at his secret appearance in the clouds of the air. You can learn more and give support to this ministry at signsoftheLastDays.org. The last days are not the end, but the beginning of a wonderful new future in Jesus Christ for those that believe. God bless.
Signs of the times are everywhere. There's a brand new feeling in the air. Keep your eyes upon the eastern sky.